Welcome back, guys. Tonight we're going to go ahead and do episode number 8 of the stock removal knife build. We've built the knife, now it's time to make a sheath. Let's talk about the pros and cons to using leather or kydex and get right into it. Leather working is my favorite part of knife making. I have to admit it, I got into knife making because I love knives and I loved making knives, but once I started working with leather, what an incredible artistic medium to play with. Leather is awesome. So if you haven't already figured out, I prefer working with leather than kydex, although I do use kydex a lot. So my favorite way to use the kydex is I like to fold the kydex over my knife for secure retention, and then I wrap the kydex in leather so I still have that leather feel, that old world leather feel of the sheath, but yet I have that new age technical advantage of having the kydex on the inside. I call it a hybrid sheath. That's awesome. I love to make the hybrid type sheaths. I do it all the time. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that later in the video, but in this video I've decided we're going to go ahead and do leather for this knife tutorial build series. I think that leather is an easier medium to play with. It's easier to start. There's less of an initial investment to get ready to go to build a leather sheath. I want to go ahead and go over the different types of sheaths, the various different designs and styles. I want to talk about the skill level of each sheath that you can make. Some sheaths are a little easier to make than others. Some sheaths are much more technical to make. So, you kind of have to decide where you're at in your skill set to take on certain projects and have a really high success at it. So let's go ahead, I'm going to bring you around, let's get started. There's a lot of different types of leather sheaths that you can make, and a lot of the deciding factor on what sheath you're going to make will depend on the style of knife that you've made. If you've made a knife like a Bowie knife with a big guard on it, you're going to have to make a sheath where the guard stops at the top of the sheath like this. If you make a hunting knife or a camping knife, you can make a traditional style pocket sheath, which is 2 pieces of leather and a welt, and the knife is kind of wet formed into it with a belt loop. That looks like this. Or you can get real fancy and build a holster style sheath, which is a pocket sheath that has a second piece that it fits into for the belt loop, so that, say you jump into a car, you've got the belt loop, you can pull the holster out of the belt loop and not have to take it off your belt. That looks like this. Or the bushcrafter guys, they like to build fold-over sheaths that look like this. get super fancy and do any type of sheath that you want and do inlay work like this. Okay, so on the table, what we have here are hole punches. We're going to start at the left and move our way around the table. These cut precision circles in leather. Absolutely ideal. Try to cut a circle without one of these. You'll never get a good circle. Buy some hole punches. Same deal. This is a hole punch. This is the hole punch that I've used from day one. I bought a really good expensive one. It's never failed me. You have different sizes of holes that you can cut in your leather. It's perfect. It works great every time. Don't go cheap on these things. Buy one, you'll own it forever. These guys right here are stamping tools. These do various textures in your leather depending on what you're going for. These right here can do borders, textures, add embellishments, all kinds of different stuff. This is probably next level. On your first sheaths, you're probably not going to use any of these. These can get quite expensive. I buy those when they're on sale. Now, I'm going to show you each one of these tools, explain to you what they do, and then I'm going to show you which tools that you'll absolutely need. This is a stitching wheel. They have different wheels. And each one of these wheels, these tips are spaced differently. And what happens is you roll this along your leather to space out your stitching. Very handy. This is a V-gouge. When you run this through the leather, it cuts a V-gouge in the leather. Very handy for doing fold-over sheaths. These two tools right here are stitch groovers. They cut a groove in the leather that you can do at an even space from the edge of your leather for the stitching to lay into. And this one right here, I have a tool in there that creases the leather rather than cuts a groove. This one I don't use very often. I found this tool kind of hops my edge and I end up screwing up my leather piece quite often with this tool. In fact, this has cost me more leather than any other tool in my shop. But this one, the cheap one, works absolutely fantastic. These right here are all edge beveling tools. These clean up your edges. These bevel the edges. You run them right down the edge of the leather and it cuts off a strip. These are different sizes. We have a 2, 3, and 4. I bought all of these. I've used all of them. I could throw these two in the trash because this is the only one that I ever use, a number 2. And I think I could actually go even finer on my edge beveler and I could be real happy with that. These two tools right here I use for thinning down leather. This right here just has a razor blade right here, and I use that like if I'm going to do a belt strap and fold it over and I don't want the thickness of 2 pieces of leather, I just use this to skive down the leather a little bit. And this one I use when I'm putting in snaps and buttons like this. When I punch the hole, I'll kind of dig this in a circle to dig out some leather so that the back of the snap sits flush with the leather and doesn't protrude. So that's another neat tool to have. You could use a razor blade for that. Then over here, all the way up here, I've got a couple daubers and a paintbrush. These are extremely handy when you come to dye your leather. Extremely handy. These are, in my opinion, very expensive for what they are, but you see I buy them because that's how handy that they are. We're gonna move over to here. I have a simple razor blade. I have this guy right here. This is a hair tool. When you run this over the leather, it's got little tiny grooves and it makes it look like hair, which is really kind of cool. I'll show you these on leather here in just a minute. This tool I've used once or twice. Definitely not a tool that you need. This tool is very valuable. This is a keyhole punch. You put this in straps wherever you might have a ball like this, right there. So you punch this and it punches a hole and then a little tail off, and it allows that hole to expand to go over something like this and lock into place. For straps, this is an extremely nice tool to have. These are modeling spoons. They're great for working with your leather, for texturing, for laying out lines, for marking on the leather, for cutting. Excellent tools to have. This is a cutting knife for leather. You know, I don't even know what they call this. It's like it's not a round knife. Oh, this is a swivel knife. That's what this is. But really easy to resharpen, and when your leather's wet, you just hold it like this and you can turn it, and it allows you to cut really intricate shapes by turning it and moving it with the tip. Really nice. Pliers, indispensable in leatherworking for this part right here. Stitching, I have several different, I actually have like 6 different size needles. These are Glover's needles over here. I find that these eyes break really easy. That's why I have a whole bag, and I've since stopped using these because these break so easily. These are, they've got a much smaller eye. They're a lot harder to thread, but they never break. So, you know, harder to thread, never break. These are the ones I use. I've got a couple different things out here. This is artificial sinew. Absolutely love this stuff. Plus, when you burn it, it just balls up and then won't come undone. Then I've got some cotton right here, some cotton thread. You can get this in black, brown. This is a braided waxed thread. I actually like this quite a bit. The only downside to cotton is you have to tie it to get it to stay, and then you have a knot somewhere. So you have to, if you have a place that you can hide a knot, use this. If you don't, I like to use synthetics, nylon, because you could just hit it with a lighter and it balls up and then won't come undone. These tools here are the tools that you need to set all of the hardware that I have laid out that I'm going to show you. So this is the anvil for all your snaps. And then these are the different tools needed to set snaps, rivets. I've got a couple homemade tools here for setting copper rivets and burrs. But you'll need one of these full sets to do pretty much all of the work setting these guys down here. Now, let's talk hardware. We have eyelets right here. These right here are eyelets. You have a setter for this. You punch a hole, you put this through, and you roll the back over so that both sides look like this. These are really handy, super cool, especially if you want to put like a lanyard strap or something like that through your sheath leather. Kydex, you're definitely going to use these. We've got snaps laying on the table next. They come in all different shapes and sizes, different colors. You know, it really just depends on what you're going for. I personally like these antiqued ones the best. I like this one, and I've got these nickel or antique nickel ones are really nice. A little too shiny for me. The brass ones I purchased early on. I very rarely use these brass ones. Moving on. This is a copper rivet. These are my absolute favorite. This is probably the strongest way to hold material together. You drive this post through a hole that you have in your material, and then you drive this burr on the back side, and it hangs on really tight. Then you trim this rivet and you peen it over with a ball peen hammer, and it is there mechanically forever. These guys right here, we use these in sheath making all the time for straps. You have a post in the back, and then this comes on the front, and you hammer it down into place, and then that's a good thing to attach for a strap. Those come in all different colors, black, silver, stainless, you name it. We've got these guys right here. These are screws. Now this screw right here has a type of backing plate that locks to your material so that when you screw this side down, this side doesn't have anything on it. And those come out really nice for sheaths. We use those a lot. But more often I use this type of screw right here. Now this is a screw and post where one side is finished and it's just nice and shiny. Now the cool thing about this screw and post I have found is I always buy the long version right here, because what I could do is I could walk over to my grinder and I can shorten this down. Since the screw doesn't go the full length, you know, I can shorten that down quite a bit and not have to worry about the screw bottoming out. I've had to cut the screw down once or twice before to shorten it up even more than that, but pretty rare. I use these all the time, especially in my hybrid sheaths that have a kydex internal and wrapped in leather. That's what I use to hold the two parts together. Moving on, down here I've got a whole assortment of rivets. These guys right here. So it's a post with a cap. And basically you just stick the post through a hole and the cap goes on, and you use a rivet setter to expand this post underneath the head. And they use these on jeans a lot, and clothing and different things like that. These come in all different colors. I've got them in antique, silver, bright silver, brushed nickel, brass, you know, just you name it. They come in all different sizes. The thing about these is you could trim the post down, but see how they've dimpled the post? Whoa. The thing about these guys is you could trim this down, but the way that they dimple it to promote it to expand inside the head, that's hard to duplicate. So you really want to buy these the right size for the thickness of leather that you're working with, and it makes a big difference. So now that I've showed you all that other stuff, this is all you're going to need for your first sheath. And actually, the stitching wheel we can remove. The stitching groover we can remove. The edge beveler we can remove. So that leaves you with a razor knife, a pair of pliers, your yarn, which I'm going to use sinew, and a needle. That's all you have to have. These tools are nice and they're very inexpensive. I order all my tools from Tandy Leather. You can get these for under 30 bucks for all these. You'll see why I like to use these, but you can do it without these. This allows your stitches to lay beneath the surface of the leather, but they don't have to. It just further protects your stitching. So I would suggest using one of these. This, I'm going to show you a way to mark out stitches a different way with something else that I know you already have in your shop. And this right here cleans up the edges. You can do that or you don't have to do that. That's up to you. I personally think the leather looks a lot nicer with a nice beveled edge. This is a very consistent way to do it. You can do it without it. Alright, so right off the bat, we're going to talk about the kydex. If you wanted to do a kydex, you're going to need to make yourself a kydex press, something that has a type of foam in it that can push down on the kydex while it's hot. The foam has to be rated for a temperature so it can't melt. I've kind of gotten by with not using this foam on my kydex sheaths by faking it. I use several layers of a fluffy towel and then a cutting board, and on my counter I could just kind of press down and get it to form. But it doesn't give you the really crisp lines that you see on a lot of kydex sheaths that are made. I've never invested in a kydex press because I do use leather more often than not. So if you want to do a kydex sheath and you want to do it right, you probably need to purchase the material to either make a press or to just buy a press. So there's a pretty large investment right there. And then also around the border of a kydex sheath, you have to set all of those, what are those called? The eyelets. So you'll need an eyelet setter, and if you go cheap on those, they don't set properly. You'll need to kind of do some research there. So your initial investment on kydex can be kind of high versus we can make a leather sheath for very low cost. So that's why I suggest you do a leather sheath for your first one. You know, Kydex might actually be easier because you just heat the material, fold it over, put it in a press, trim it out, drill some holes, pop your eyelets in, and you're done. But, you know, if you're willing to eat that initial cost to make your first sheath, go for it. It's not my thing. Anyhow, okay, for the build series knife, I've decided that we're gonna do a fold over sheath. It's a great design, I love it, I haven't done one in a while. It's gonna fit this knife perfectly, the contours of the knife. It's gonna look really nice, and I think you guys will enjoy it. So let's jump right in. If you do decide that you'd rather make a pocket sheath, I've already got a video that I've made on making knife sheaths, so I'll go ahead and add the link below. You can click on that and watch an in-depth video of how I make a pocket sheath. Okay, if we're gonna do a fold over sheath, we're gonna lay the knife like this, as if it's gonna lay on your waist. So if we're right-handed, the sheath's gonna go on the right side, it's gonna lay just like that. So what we're gonna do is first we're gonna draw a line straight here, just to kind of give us a center point. Alright, now you have to think when you fold the leather over, this isn't gonna really turn much, okay? So you kind of want to get that right about there. That's going to work out really nice. Let's see, just give this a nice contour. You're not going to want to go too small in this area here, or else you will end up with not enough room to sew in your welt, the center piece of leather that we're going to have to put in there. Alright, this is not rocket science. You just kind of... There we go. I'm going to have it flare just a little bit, and then you're going to want the sheath to stop a ways down from the end of the handle so you have a little bit of handle to grab onto. That helps. Okay, so that's nice. I like that. So let's kind of give it one of those. I like that. That's it right there. So easy as pie. All we're going to do is fold this over and cut it out. That's going to be our sheath. Just like that. So we folded it over. It's gonna look real nice. Let's see, that's gonna go all the way down to there. Yeah, I'm gonna like that.